My dear brothers and sisters in Islam, today we continue with a topic that shakes the very foundations of our faith and tests the strength of our conviction, the true story of Dajjal. This is not just a tale from the unseen. It is a powerful reminder of our purpose, our struggles, and our ultimate destination. When we reflect on the reality of Dajjal, we are not engaging in mere imagination, rather, we are preparing our hearts for one of the greatest trials humanity will ever face. The trial of Dajjal is described as the greatest fitnah in human history. And when we reflect upon this, we must realize that preparation for it is not something that can be postponed to the future. Too often, people think that when the time comes, when the Dajjal appears, they will somehow be strong enough to resist him. But the truth is, no one suddenly becomes strong without prior training, and no one can suddenly build faith when their hearts have long been empty of it. Preparation begins today with the choices we make, with the discipline we build, and with the sincerity we nurture in our connection with Allah. The Prophet did not tell us about Dajjal simply to frighten us. He told us so that we would remain vigilant, building a shield of Iman before the storm arrives. When we say Dajjal is the greatest trial, we are not talking about something small or simple. This is a trial that will challenge the very essence of belief. Imagine a man who appears with extraordinary powers, able to control nature, able to command wealth, and even able to appear as though he brings the dead back to life. To the human eye, to the weak heart, this looks like divinity. This looks like ultimate power. Yet it is nothing but deception. The challenge for believers will be to see beyond the dazzling illusions and hold fast to what Allah has revealed. That requires a level of conviction that cannot be built in a single day. It requires years of consistent worship, remembrance, and trust in Allah. Preparation for Dajjal's trial is like preparing for a storm you know is coming. You cannot wait until the clouds gather to start building your shelter. You must strengthen the foundations of your home long before the winds arrive. In the same way, our spiritual foundation must be solid now. Salah must not be something we do out of habit or pressure, but something we establish with khushu, with presence of heart. Qur'an must not be a book that gathers dust on our shelves, but a light we live by, a guide that shapes our every step. When these habits are built today, the faith within us will be strong tomorrow. It is also important to remember that this fitnah will not only test individuals, but entire societies. Communities that are built upon weak values, that run after material wealth, and that glorify falsehood will easily fall under Dajjal's influence. This is why preparation is not just personal, it is collective. Families must be raised on truth. Children must grow up recognizing the difference between what is real and what is illusion, what is eternal and what is temporary. In a world where deception is already normalized through media, advertising, and false ideals of success, our preparation becomes even more urgent. We are already being trained, whether we realize it or not, to accept falsehood if we do not hold tightly to Allah's guidance. Another layer of preparation is learning contentment with what Allah provides. Dajjal will come offering food, wealth, and security to those who follow him. For those who are hungry, weak, or greedy, his temptations will be irresistible. But for the believer who has learned patience, who has learned to rely on Allah, even in hardship, those offers will mean nothing. If your heart trusts that recuse comes only from Allah, no false promise can buy your faith. That level of trust must be cultivated now by practicing gratitude, by enduring trials with sabr, and by constantly reminding ourselves that this world is temporary, while the next is eternal. The Prophet also told us to seek refuge in Allah from the fitnah of Dajjal in our daily prayers. This shows us that preparation is not simply about physical strength or intelligence, it is deeply rooted in spiritual consciousness. Every time we ask Allah for protection, We acknowledge our weakness and his strength. We admit that without his help, we cannot survive the coming trial. That humility itself is a form of protection because it trains the heart to depend on Allah alone, not on appearances, not on miracles, not on worldly power. So, my brothers and sisters, when we say Dajjal is the greatest fitnah, we are not speaking about a distant event in some vague future. We are speaking about a reality that every believer must prepare for as if it could arrive tomorrow. The preparation begins in our salah, in our remembrance of Allah, in our study of the Qur'an, in our families, and in our communities. It begins with the small decisions we make every single day, choosing truth over lies, halal over haram, humility over arrogance. When the time comes, the world will be filled with confusion, but the believer who has prepared will see through the illusions. The heart that has lived with certainty in Allah will not be shaken by false miracles. The soul that has tasted the sweetness of Iman will not be tempted by temporary comfort. That is why preparation cannot wait. The fitnah of Dajjal is the greatest in human history, but those who take their faith seriously today will be the ones who stand firm tomorrow. Dajjal's miracles will not be miracles in the true sense. Rather, they will be illusions designed to deceive hearts that lack firm belief. When the messenger of Allah warned us about Dajjal, he made it clear that this deception will not be ordinary. It will be so powerful and so convincing that those whose faith is weak will see truth in falsehood and falsehood in truth. Dajjal will present signs that challenge human understanding. Rains that fall at his command, barren lands that suddenly produce crops, treasures that emerge from the ground, and even the appearance of giving life to the dead. To an unprepared eye, this will look divine, as though he controls the world. But the reality is that all of this is nothing but a test, a series of illusions permitted by Allah to expose the state of people's hearts. Those who have lived their lives without strengthening their Iman will be among the first to fall prey to his tricks. Consider how easily people are deceived in our time when we are not even confronted by Dajjal himself. A simple advertisement convinces masses to spend their wealth. A celebrity's words become more trusted than divine revelation, and the glitter of material wealth blinds entire generations. If such small illusions can already control hearts, what then when the greatest deceiver in history stands before humanity performing what appears to be supernatural acts? This is why the Prophet emphasized that the key to survival is not intelligence or cleverness, but firm belief in Allah, unshakable tawheed, and a heart filled with Qur'an and Sunnah. The so-called miracles of Dajjal will not stand the test of true reflection. Rain, fertility, and wealth are already under Allah's command, and the one who truly believes knows that no man, no matter what powers he displays, can take on the role of the Creator. But when desperation and desire take hold of people, logic and faith are the first to be abandoned. Imagine a family starving, children crying of hunger, and suddenly Dajjal appears, offering food in exchange for faith. This is where illusions become deadly. The weak-hearted will see relief, while the strong-hearted will see deception. The difference between the two lies in preparation, in whether the person has trained their soul to put trust in Allah, even in the hardest moments. Even more frightening is the way Dajjal will manipulate appearances of life and death. People will witness him seemingly kill someone and then bring him back to life. For those who see with only their eyes, this will appear to be godlike power. But for those who see with the light of Iman, it will be clear that life and death belong only to Allah. This is why memorizing the first verses of Surah Al-Kahf and holding tightly to Tawheed is so crucial. These verses emphasize the truth of Allah's power, the reality of tests, and the fate of those who are deceived by this worldly life. They anchor the believer's heart so that no matter how convincing the illusion, it cannot overshadow the eternal truth. We also must understand that deception works best when people are already inclined toward it. Dajjal's illusions will not trap those who have no love for worldly glitter, but they will easily ensnare those whose hearts are attached to wealth, fame, and comfort. This means that our preparation today is about detaching ourselves from over dependence on the material world. If wealth is what controls our happiness, if status is what defines our worth, then Dajjal's offers will be irresistible. But if we are content with what Allah provides, if we recognize that true honor is only with Allah, then no illusion will shake our foundation. In many ways, we are being trained for this even now. Every day, falsehood is presented to us as truth, and truth is ridiculed as backwardness. Every day, desires are marketed as freedom and sins are sold as pleasures. These are smaller versions of Dajjal's illusions, testing our ability to see clearly. If we fail in these smaller tests, how can we hope to succeed when the greatest deceiver arrives? But if we learn today to reject lies, to question false promises, and to hold on to our faith even when it is unpopular, then inshallah, when the ultimate deception comes, our hearts will already be armed with clarity. So, my brothers and sisters, understand that Dajjal's so-called miracles are nothing but tools to expose the condition of people's faith. They will not harm those who know that Allah alone is Al-Khaliq, the creator, Al-Razak, the provider, and Al-Muhyi, the giver of life. They will not deceive those who carry Qur'an in their hearts and live by it in their actions. They will not shake the hearts of those who recognize that no matter how dazzling falsehood appears, it will always fade before the eternal light of truth. The lesson is clear. Prepare your heart now. Fill it with the remembrance of Allah. Train it to depend only on Him, and discipline it to resist worldly temptations. Because when Dajjal presents his illusions, it will not be the eyes that decide the truth. It will be the heart. And only the heart firm in Iman will see through the deception and remain standing in the face of the greatest trial mankind has ever known. Holding firmly to Tawheed and memorizing Surah Al-Kahf are shields of protection against the deception of Dajjal. This is not a mere suggestion. It is guidance given directly by the Prophet who knew the severity of the trial and the vulnerability of human hearts. Tawheed, the oneness of Allah, is the very foundation of our faith, and it is the weapon that dismantles every form of falsehood. When a believer has deeply internalized Tawheed, no display of power, no illusion, and no temptation can shake his certainty that only Allah is the true Lord of the heavens and the earth. The trial of Dajjal is designed to confuse, to blur lines between truth and falsehood, but Tawheed clarifies everything. It reminds us that no one has authority over creation except Allah. No one controls provision except Allah. And no one brings life or causes death except Allah. This is why Tawheed is not just a concept to be understood intellectually, but a reality that must be lived in the heart. It is the lens through which we see the world. When someone is deeply rooted in Tawheed, they are immune to the dazzle of false miracles. Dajjal may claim divinity, but the believer who has nurtured his faith will instantly reject such claims, because he knows that Allah has no partners, no rivals, and no equals. This certainty cannot be faked or developed at the last moment. It is cultivated daily through worship, dua, reflection, and remembrance of Allah. The more we purify our belief in Allah alone, the stronger our shield becomes against the whispers and deceptions of Dajjal. Alongside Tawheed, the Prophet instructed us to recite and memorize the opening verses of Surah Kahf. These verses contain profound lessons that directly counter the deceptions of Dajjal. Surah Al-Kahf tells us stories of people who face trials of faith, wealth, knowledge, and power, and it shows us how to overcome them by relying on Allah. Each story in the surah is like a training ground for the believer, teaching patience, reliance on divine wisdom, and detachment from worldly glitter. When a believer internalizes these lessons, he gains the ability to resist even the most powerful deception. Take, for example, the story of the people of the cave. They were young men who fled their society to preserve their faith, showing us that true success lies not in worldly comfort, but in holding on to belief. This directly prepares us for the trial of Dajjal, who will offer comfort, wealth, and ease in exchange for disbelief. The believer who has absorbed the lesson of the cave will know that faith is more valuable than anything the world can offer. Similarly, the story of the man with two gardens warns against arrogance in wealth and pride in worldly success. Dajjal's fitnah will exploit people's desire for material gain, but the believer who has reflected on this story will not be deceived, for he knows that worldly possessions are temporary and meaningless compared to eternal life with Allah. Surah Al-Kahf also addresses the trial of knowledge in the story of Musa and Khidr. This story teaches that divine wisdom is greater than human understanding, and that we must trust Allah, even when we do not comprehend His plans. Dajjal will confuse people by presenting what appears to be extraordinary knowledge or control over the unseen. But those who understand this lesson will not be shaken, because they know that the unseen belongs only to Allah. Finally, the story of Dhul Qarnayn demonstrates how true power is not in domination or tyranny, but in using authority with justice and humility. Dajjal's power will be oppressive, but the believer who understands this lesson will see it for what it is, a test, not a proof of divinity. Memorizing these verses is not just about recitation, it is about carrying their meanings in the heart. When faced with Dajjal's illusions, these verses will act as a light, guiding the believer through darkness. They remind him that no matter how powerful falsehood appears, it will always collapse before the truth of Allah's words. The Quran is not simply a book to be recited in ritual, but a shield to be lived with, a constant source of strength against trials of every kind. In today's world, we see glimpses of Dajjal's system already at work. Truth distorted, desires glorified, and falsehood presented as progress. If we do not cling to Tawheed and the Quran now, we will be vulnerable when the ultimate trial arrives. But if we train ourselves today, placing our full trust in Allah and filling our hearts with His words, we will stand firm tomorrow. Every salah we pray with sincerity, every ayah we reflect upon, and every time we declare La ilaha illallah, with conviction we strengthen the fortress around our hearts. So, the shield is clear, unwavering belief in Allah's oneness and the light of Surah Al-Kahf. These are not small practices. They are the difference between being deceived by Dajjal or standing firm against him. Let us commit ourselves to this preparation now, for hearts rooted in Tawheed and illuminated by Quran will never bow to falsehood, no matter how powerful or convincing it appears. The system of Dajjal exists today in the form of materialism, deception, and normalized sins, and this reality is something many overlook. People often imagine Dajjal only as a future figure who will emerge at the end of time, but what they fail to realize is that the groundwork for his arrival has already been laid. His system is being established in the hearts, minds, and lifestyles of people even before he physically appears. This is what makes the trial so dangerous. It is gradual, subtle, and often disguised as progress, success, or freedom. When we look at the modern world, we see how falsehood is wrapped in attractive packaging. Materialism is sold as happiness, immorality is marketed as liberation, and deception is broadcast as truth. These are all mini trials preparing humanity for the greatest deception to come. Materialism is one of the strongest tools of this system. The obsession with wealth, possessions, and status has reached unprecedented levels. People are judged by what they own rather than who they are, and success is measured by money rather than character or faith. This culture of endless desire creates hearts that are empty of gratitude and constantly chasing more. Such hearts are vulnerable to Dajjal's promises, for when he comes offering food, wealth, and treasures, those who have lived their entire lives chasing the dunya will fall straight into his trap. The believer who understands the danger of materialism will train himself to be content with what Allah provides, to see wealth as a tool and not as a goal. That contentment will be his shield when Dajjal tempts the masses. Another element of this system is deception through information and media. In our age, lies spread faster than truth, and the voices of falsehood are louder than the voices of guidance. What is haram is often presented as normal, even desirable, while what is halal is mocked or marginalized. Every day, people consume entertainment, news, and content that subtly reshapes their values, pulling them further from Islam without them even realizing it. This is how deception works. It does not always come in the form of blatant falsehood, but often through half-truths, manipulations, and distractions. Dajjal's power will be built upon deception on a global scale, but the seeds of that deception are already present in the technologies and systems that dominate our lives today. Sins have also been normalized to such an extent that what was once shameful is now celebrated. Acts that displease Allah are labeled as personal choices, freedom, or even virtues. This normalization makes hearts numb to sin, and when sin no longer feels wrong, guidance becomes irrelevant. This is precisely what the system of Dajjal thrives on, creating a society where people no longer see the difference between right and wrong, where morality is relative, and where divine commands are seen as outdated. In such an environment, when Dajjal appears and offers his false version of truth, many will follow him without hesitation because they have already been conditioned to embrace falsehood. We also see the rise of ideologies that deny the need for God altogether. A growing number of people believe that science, technology, or human intellect alone can solve every problem. While knowledge and advancement are blessings, when they are divorced from faith, they become tools of arrogance. This arrogance is at the heart of Dajjal's system. The belief that humanity can control everything and does not need Allah. It is a dangerous mindset that blinds people to the reality of their dependence on the Creator. Those who are attached to such ideologies will find it easy to worship Dajjal when he displays his illusions of control, because they already idolize human power over divine guidance. For the believer, recognizing this system is the first step to resisting it. We must look at the world with eyes of faith, filtering everything through the Qur'an and Sunnah. When materialism calls, we remind ourselves that true wealth is contentment of the heart. When deception spreads, we hold tightly to truth, no matter how unpopular. When sins are normalized, we cling to modesty and righteousness, even if the world mocks us. It is not easy, but it is essential, because every small resistance today strengthens us against the greater deception tomorrow. Ultimately, the system of Dajjal thrives on hearts that are empty of remembrance of Allah. A heart filled with Qur'an, dhikr, and Tawheed cannot be conquered by deception. This is why the Prophet emphasized daily worship, dua, and seeking Allah's protection from the trials of Dajjal. These are not just rituals, they are spiritual armor. Every prayer strengthens the soul, every verse memorized adds light to the heart, and every sincere moment with Allah builds resilience against the pull of this world. So let us not think of Dajjal as only a future enemy. His system is already here, shaping societies and molding minds. The believer's task is to resist it, to rise above it, and to prepare for the day when the deception reaches its peak. If we cannot resist the small illusions now, how will we stand firm against the greatest deceiver in history? But if we train ourselves today through Tawheed, Qur'an, and steadfastness, then when Dajjal finally comes, his system will hold no power over us. Only those who strengthen their Iman and remain connected to the Qur'an will withstand the trial of Dajjal. This is a truth that cannot be emphasized enough, because when the greatest deception of mankind arrives, no amount of intelligence, wealth, or status will be able to protect a person. What will save us is Iman, faith rooted so deeply in the heart that no illusion, no temptation, and no trial can shake it. And Iman is not something we inherit automatically or something that appears overnight. It is something we nurture, cultivate, and protect throughout our lives. It is like a tree that must be watered daily with prayer, remembrance, and obedience to Allah. The Qur'an is the water, the nourishment, and the light for that tree. Without it, Iman withers, and a withered faith cannot stand against Dajjal. When we look at the descriptions of Dajjal's fitnah, it becomes clear that the battle is not external, it is internal. He would not come with armies that fight believers on a battlefield in the traditional sense. Rather, his weapons will be lies, illusions, and temptations. He will test the heart's loyalty. Does it belong to Allah or does it belong to the dunya? A heart that is weak, distracted, and empty will collapse under the weight of such a test. But a heart that has been strengthened by Quran will recognize the falsehood immediately. The Quran gives clarity, it separates truth from falsehood, and it grants the believer a light to navigate through the darkest trials. Strengthening Iman requires consistency. It is not enough to claim belief with words, while neglecting the actions that prove it. Salah must be established regularly and with sincerity, for every prayer reminds us of our dependence on Allah and shields us from evil. Fasting trains the soul to resist desires, teaching discipline and patience, qualities that will be essential when faced with Dajjal's temptations. Charity purifies wealth and detaches the heart from materialism, weakening one of Dajjal's strongest tools. Every act of worship builds layers of protection around the believer until his faith becomes unshakable. Connection to the Quran is just as crucial. The Prophet specifically instructed us to recite and memorize portions of Surah Al-Kahf as protection against Dajjal. This is not symbolic advice, it is practical. The surah speaks of trials of faith, wealth, knowledge, and power, all of which mirror the temptations Dajjal will use. Reciting it regularly ingrains these lessons into the heart, equipping the believer with the mindset and resilience to resist falsehood. Beyond Surah Al-Kahf, the entire Quran is a shield. Its verses are reminders of Allah's power, His mercy, and the reality of the hereafter. They expose the weakness of human illusions and refocus the believer on what truly matters. A person who lives with Quran, reflects on its meanings, and allows it to shape his life will see through Dajjal's lies, as if they were nothing but smoke and mirrors. The reality is that Dajjal will not just test individuals in isolation, he will test communities and nations. Societies built on greed, arrogance, and disobedience will fall easily. But communities that nurture Iman collectively will stand strong. This is why it is important to raise families upon Quran and Sunnah, to create homes where children hear the words of Allah daily, and to build communities that prioritize worship and righteousness. When Iman is a shared foundation, the pressure of Dajjal's trial will be easier to bear. One believer strengthens another, just as one heart connected to Quran inspires another to remain steadfast. We must also remember that Iman is not tested in ease, but in hardship. Dajjal's trial will not simply be about resisting illusions of power. It will also be about enduring suffering. He will withhold food. He will deny resources. And he will punish those who refuse to follow him. The believer who survives will not be the one who gives in for comfort, but the one who trusts Allah even when hungry, even when isolated, even when threatened. That level of faith is not built in moments of crisis, but in the daily struggles we face now. Every time we choose patience in difficulty, every time we trust Allah when things don't go our way, we are training our hearts for the greater trial. Ultimately, Iman is what ties the believer to Allah, and the Qur'an is what strengthens that bond. Dajjal's power lies in separating people from Allah, making them forget Him, doubt Him, or disobey Him. But a heart full of Qur'an cannot forget Allah, cannot doubt His words, and cannot be swayed by false promises. Such a heart will see Dajjal not as a god or a savior, but as what he truly is, the greatest liar. So, my brothers and sisters, the path is clear. If we wish to survive the trial of Dajjal, we must begin strengthening our Iman today. We must hold firmly to the rope of Allah, immerse ourselves in the Quran, and let it shape our actions, our families, and our communities. Every verse memorized, every salah prayed with sincerity, and every moment of dhikr adds to the shield that will protect us when the world is engulfed in deception. Only those who carry the light of faith will walk safely through the darkness of Dajjal's trial, and those who remain connected to the Quran will never be blinded by his lies. The story of Dajjal is not meant to create fear, but to inspire readiness, courage, and reliance on Allah. Too often when people hear about Dajjal, they imagine only the horror of his arrival and the terrifying illusions he will bring. They focus on the chaos, the hunger, the suffering, and the confusion, and their hearts fill with dread. But if we truly understand why the Prophet described this fitnah in such detail, we realize it was never to paralyze us with fear. It was to awaken us, to prepare us, and to give us the tools to face it with strength and clarity. Fear alone leads to despair, but preparation and reliance on Allah lead to courage. And courage is what every believer will need in the time of Dajjal. The Prophet did not intend to frighten the believers into hopelessness. He gave us specific protections, like reciting Surah Al-Kahf, making dua for refuge from the fitnah of Dajjal, and holding firmly to Tawheed. These are practical steps, not fearful reactions. They show us that while the trial of Dajjal is immense, the mercy of Allah is greater. Allah does not leave His servants defenseless. Just as every disease has a cure, every fitnah has a shield, and the shield against Dajjal is built upon readiness and reliance on Allah. This should fill our hearts not with panic, but with determination, for Allah has already shown us the path to safety. Readiness means being awake to the reality of our world and to the state of our own hearts. It means realizing that the deception of Dajjal is not something far away, but something that begins with the small trials we face daily. When falsehood is celebrated, when sins are normalized, when lies are dressed as truth, these are all reminders that the system of Dajjal is already being prepared. Instead of fearing it passively, we are meant to see it as a call to action, to strengthen our Iman, to deepen our connection to Qur'an, and to purify our hearts. The believer who takes these steps is not frightened of Dajjal, but prepared for him, because he knows Allah is greater than any deceiver. Reliance on Allah is the key that transforms fear into courage. No one will survive Dajjal through their own strength, intelligence, or cleverness. Even the most knowledgeable scholars or the bravest warriors will not endure unless they rely completely on Allah. The Prophet himself taught us to seek refuge in Allah from the trial of Dajjal in every salah, showing us that protection comes only from Him. This reliance does not weaken us, it strengthens us. It reminds us that no matter how powerful Dajjal appears, his power is nothing compared to Allah's. His illusions cannot harm a heart firmly attached to the Creator. His promises cannot tempt a soul that trusts in Allah's provision. And his threats cannot shake one who knows that life and death belong only to Allah. Courage in the face of Dajjal comes from knowing that the story does not end with him. His trial, no matter how severe, is temporary. The Prophet informed us that Isa ibn Maryam Yonid VC will return, defeat Dajjal, and restore justice. This promise of Allah should fill our hearts with certainty that falsehood, no matter how strong, will never last. Truth will prevail, And victory belongs to the believers. So the believer does not despair when hearing about Dajjal. He looks beyond the trial to the triumph that awaits. That perspective itself is empowering. It allows us to face the hardest tests with calmness and resolve, knowing that every step of patience brings us closer to Allah's eternal reward. Another reason the story of Dajjal inspires courage is that it reminds us of our own purpose. We were not created to live forever in this world of deception. We were created to worship Allah and to strive for the eternal life of the hereafter. Dajjal's arrival will expose who truly understood this and who was distracted by the glitter of dunya. If we already live with the hereafter in mind, Dajjal's promises of temporary relief will mean nothing to us. Hunger loss or difficulty will not shake us, because our eyes will be fixed on Jannah, where no hunger or pain will ever touch us again. That mindset transforms the fear of trials into a readiness to sacrifice for Allah's sake. And sacrifice for Allah is the essence of courage. So the story of Dajjal is a wake-up call, not a nightmare. It calls us to strengthen our Iman now, to detach from materialism, to hold fast to Qur'an, and to put our trust fully in Allah. It tells us not to fear the deceiver, but to fear losing our connection with Allah. For that is the only real danger. When we rely on Him, no trial can overcome us. And when we live with that reliance, we will face not only the fitnah of Dajjal, but every trial of life with steadfastness, patience, and courage. Let us remember that Allah has already promised His believers protection and victory. The story of Dajjal is meant to inspire us to prepare, to purify, and to stand firm, not to tremble in despair. So do not let fear control you. Let faith guide you. Do not let the thought of his trial weaken your heart. Let it strengthen your resolve. For those who walk with Allah, no deception, no illusion, and no enemy, no matter how powerful, can ever lead them astray.